Hi, welcome to the Effective Business Hub podcast. And today I have with me Duncan Monroe with a 3D shop, and appreciate everybody being on the call today. So, Duncan, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what you're doing and where you're at today?
Sure. So thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity to come on a podcast that's focused on, manufacturing and business growth and challenges, and also to be the first 3D printer you have on here. That's pretty cool. The 3D shop is something that I got started with when my roommate and friend from high school and college, who was an aerospace engineer, he had a 3D printer. This was back in 2017. And I was actually a business major. And when I saw a machine that could actually produce anything, I was interested. And also apologies for any potential noise in the background here. So that would be a printer messing around with carbon fiber material that can sometimes be a little loud. So anyway, when I first saw that, I thought that was really interesting because you have a lot of manufacturing processes that involve you buy this $1 million machine and then all of a sudden you have just one part you can make. Meanwhile, with a 3D printer, maybe you're not able to make as sophisticated products in terms or materials, but you can make any number of things out of that material. So the general rule of thumb in 3D printing and when it can be used is really a question of, can the material be 3D printed? So of course, technically you can 3D print metal. Those machines are still very, very expensive. Prices are coming down, but practically speaking, we're thinking of plastics, thermoplastics, resins, other polymers, because they're available to more and more people as the price of those machines are coming down and the efficiency of them is going up. So assuming those things, 10,000 units is the magic number typically. And that usually can be very dependent on all of the intricacies of how complicated the mold could be to make versus how easy it would be to 3D print that because of the manufacturing process. But very, very generally speaking, at 10,000 units, you should start to break even with injection molding versus 3D printing costs that can, of course, depending on the print farm you go to, or if you're doing it yourself in-house, and of course, your own input material costs are concerned. That's really when you should be thinking about 3D printing as your solution, even as the end product, not just prototyping. But as well with our company, you introduced us as the 3D shop. I want to make sure I touch on this too. We are actually going through a bit of a rebrand right now. You can still find us on social media as the 3D shop and the 3D shop Uptown. We're still going to retain those social media handles, but our website is now called Presto Proto, proto.com. So Presto-Proto. And we have the social media handles for that as well. We did that shift mostly because while we do a lot of things 3D, it's also a bit of a difficult thing to trademark. And as we invent new things and have our brand associated with it, we want to make sure that people find us and not, any other 3D necessarily company. And so Presto Proto also really encapsulates what we do, a lot of solving problems for ourselves and other people, where you come to us and then just like magic, you have a prototype, and most of the time it works.
So, when you first got started, so how many printers did you start with, or what did you end up with?
Yeah. So cost of printers is a big factor here, right? I mean, you say you have, 5 printers or, 20 printers. I mean, Creality, MakerBot, FlashForge were kind of the big early names of printers, and they were all bad no matter what you paid for them. They all really, especially it's in today's terms as well, but just in terms of having a successful print and to speed it printed, it's pretty all over the place, but mostly bad. You had to really, it was almost like an art form of how to really get these things to work. You leveling the bed is a huge issue, what bed type you have, and there's things you can do to give yourself a higher success rate, but the parts that those things were made out of were pretty inconsistent, unreliable. So a $150 machine, $500 machine, $5,000 machine all kind of had these issues. And so what we actually started with was a Creality CR10. It had a pretty large build volume. So you could kind of make build volume, basically meaning how big of an item you could theoretically print, typically in the shape of a cube. And then we also had a smaller version of that. That was the Ender 3. We had several of those, and we were able to actually make those work. Even though we'd still have our issues, we probably have maybe an issue we have to major or minor, they'd have to iron out maybe once a week, depending on how often you were printing with it. But every single time you had an old kind of checklist of things you had to make sure were operating properly before you started every single print. And even then you had to probably sit there and watch the first couple layers go down before you can maybe even trust it to finish the job. So dramatically different than what it is today. Right now we have, fast forward to now, we've bought and sold printers, kind of updated our farm And we're sitting at right around 30 to 40 printers. We still have some of the older ones. I actually held on to one CR10B3 from back in the days when we first started out with these things, just as a nostalgia thing. And also, I mean, sometimes I can use it for something. But that also includes our resin printers, which are also really taking a bunch of leaps forward in their technologies right now as well. So really exciting to be here. We'll see how many of these machines stick around next year as we continue to upgrade and develop. But yeah, it's a really cool space in terms of figuring out what the technology that we need to invest in and keep going forward should be. So
Cool. So you've got your manufacturing process figured out. So now how do you actually bring through your ordering and customer scheduling process then? So you have a workflow that you've created, an online workflow or a custom workflow, or do you have custom software, or how do you do that?
sure. So when we kind of grew the business, initially, my business partner and I were both working in our 9 to 5 corporate jobs. He still has that corporate job that he's doing a bunch of aerospace engineering. Really sharp guy, same guy that got me into 3D printing. He's my business partner there. I was working in mainframe engineering and technology, which is a pretty cool thing. But as it started to grow, we started to, all right, let's get it out of the house, right? Let's grow beyond just having printers in the closet in the kitchen. And, that was the wife, of course, but making me make that decision. But when we moved to find a place that we actually wanted to open up, and we moved to a place called Martinsville, Virginia, which used to be a major manufacturing hub here in the United States before NAFTA.
Yep.
And so it's cool because it's got a manufacturing history, but also these days the cost of living is much more affordable. And so taking a risk on a business like this involves less overhead. A lot of them are people that hear about us and say, oh, well, that'd be really cool if I can maybe have a project done by them. Word of mouth has been pretty big for us in a small town, because that's what Martinsville is as well. It's not just a former manufacturing hub. In the United States here with low cost of living, you still have a lot of word of mouth with people. So I have built systems online for people to use, and those do get used, but you still have the business owner who's 80 years old that will not fill out a form on a website and will call you. You kind of have those, but I'd say process wise, we also recently with the rebrand, we've also been moving from Squarespace to Shopify because e-commerce has been pretty big for us in the last couple of years. So we had a form you could fill out, and it was kind of multi-stage and kind of figure out, answering some questions that we would need to know as we kind of take on projects and figure out how best to quote your project. But that was a pretty big tool for us. And that's also allowed us to get some larger clients as well, who can just find us online in the region and not just in the city and county. So that's been pretty big for us. So as far as once a job comes in, it really depends on the person. Even the big companies, it's not always just, hey, I need this part. It's, oh, well, this part can maybe be modified. Can you make this tweak? Maybe here's the part. I need you to model it from scratch. So every project looks different. And so I really wish sometimes that everything could just fit into a nice, neat box, but that's not the world, at least the world that I live in. Maybe the blessing and the curse of the technology being 3D printing, you can kind of make anything. So
Yep.
There's a lot of tweaks and things that you need to do.
So being the fact that you're pretty much custom everything, do you even have just one admin process that you would hate to do all the time? Or is there that back office thing? Every owner that I talk to, they're like, you know what, if I could just be doing my job instead of doing this. So what's
Yeah.
one thing that you're hating most?
Yeah. So I'm kind of stuck between the marketing side of it. That's something that, when we have a customer, typically they stick with us. Of course, I've had to fire a couple customers in my experience that sometimes it just needs to be done. But typically when someone works with us, they keep working with us. And sometimes they have another project immediately. Sometimes they come back in a year. So, really just doing the new client acquisition side of things is something that I wish. I mean, I'm good at it. I'm good at talking to people, but I really enjoy doing the actual work.
Yep. Like I said, that's what I get from pretty much all the owners. It's like, man, if I
Yeah.
could just be doing what I do instead of having to do all this other stuff, it would be great. But and that's part of business, is that all that other stuff is what helps drive everything. But it's always the one thing. Everybody's always got one thing, whether it's HR, whether it, like you said, the onboarding, the whole process. So it's always interesting to see what every owner comes up with. If I could just figure this out, it would make my life simpler. So that being said, so now that you're working through all that and you're growing, so when you're working with a customer, do you have major bottlenecks as far as how getting people to actually identify the project and
I guess so. If you talk about like large as in like high volume, that's
Yeah.
one thing. But if you're talking about a physically large thing, maybe it doesn't fit
Yeah.
into a single print bed, that certainly makes it. I mean, we've done plenty of projects that we've had to basically take pieces and then not stitch them together, but have them come together in a functional way that they'll actually last and stay together. We do that a lot with our signage. Actually, that was not something that I initially had set out to do with 3D printing, but just one of those things that the market has kind of asked for. We've done like several exterior signage projects for businesses in our region,
Hmm.
and that's been very cool to see come together. And every sign that we've done has been, at least, it survived so far, right? But also, it's really cool because even though it is a bit of a pain to stitch those like pieces together, once we do it, the sign itself is very lightweight. If you kind of treat it properly, then it should last as long as the paint lasts. For a lot of projects, you need to do some UV coats, you do the right material that would be more heat resistant, and you're saving these people a ton of money as opposed to doing those traditional signs that are metal and everything like that. It's been a pretty big boon for us recently. Well, I guess in the last year or two, I think we've got 5 or 6 projects right now that we're doing for signage for people,
Oh
which
my
is
gosh.
really, really cool. Yeah. I mean, never would have thought that we'd be 3D printing signs, but it's something that's worked. The first time we ever did several years ago is looking just as good as the day we put it up.
Nice.
And we've also learned things since then. So I mean, every time that we're putting out is better than the last, and so it's been pretty cool. So
That's a really cool niche to open up because was it they always say niches make riches.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm definitely curious to see how big that niche can grow. Again, plus side of being in the area we're in, lower cost of living, but also, there's maybe some new businesses opening up. I'm not putting all my eggs in that basket for sure, but
Right.
I'll definitely take the projects, as they come. So,
Boy, anytime you can open up another essentially line of business, it's a great opportunity. So, so how many folks you got working with you right now?
Yeah, so we have contractors, and that's been a big part of growing the business, is definitely wanting to hire slowly and fire quickly. And that's a lesson I definitely learned while learning it all the time. I'm unfortunately having to relearn it sometimes too. But so the contractor route has definitely been good. So we have, I think at one point we were working with like 9 people, and that's really largely because we had a product go viral last year, e-commerce wise. We made something called the Widow Ladder, and it got like 27 million views.
Wow.
And yeah, oh yeah, I mean, we sold a ton of them. And so, I had people from like the workforce development program in the region come out and like they were helping us with some interns, and that's a really cool benefit of the area I live in as well. But we also have some people that I'd say are definitely like they've stuck around, and I think we're definitely exploring some more proper employment for them here in the near future. The guy you saw behind me recently is definitely the one I'm thinking of. Like I said, as he sits next to me. So that's
So we're
that's
only
a good
saying
one
nice
to
things
answer.
about him.
No, yeah, he is the best. So, anyway, but yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things. I definitely, as we grow and do new things, it's definitely interesting. Like as we do these signs, like if I could have someone do these steps of the signs for me, that would be helpful. But another bottleneck for us right now is we're about to move into a new space that'll also allow us, I think, to settle into a more regular flow of things as well. So really excited for that. Hopefully coming in November. So
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on that. So you'll actually be able to spread out a little bit and create sort of a shop floor flow.
Yeah. Well, we had a shop before, and we are still obviously in a shop, but the one that we were in was, a decent sized space, but it was definitely a weird kind of configuration. It was an apartment, actually. It was in the back, and then it was kind of like meant to be maybe an artist studio. And so the front space was nice and big, but we also had an apartment above us as well. And like, there's definitely some things that like the resin printing can be a little odorous and also just maybe a little harmful. You want to make sure be careful about all these things. So it was cool, but definitely not an ideal, it's an ideal first spot, but definitely not where we needed to be as we grow. And so we're looking forward to the new space for sure. So
when looking at all the wonderful things that you're doing right now, so how do you personally, or what systems do you personally use to keep everything all organized and moving forward? Do you have a set of software that you use, or do you have like a Monday or something like that you're using, or how do you keep track?
So for me, the biggest thing, especially with the people that we work with and people that work for me, are adoption is the biggest challenge, right? I mean, you can have the best software in the world, but if it's not used, then everyone's wasting their time. Right now, we're leaning pretty heavily into Notion. It's if you're familiar, if you're not familiar, I mean, it's a pretty just open software that is used for a lot of different purposes. People use it personally. People use it, like college students use it for taking notes. People use it for their own projects. And then I've seen a couple of businesses that we actually work with use it as their whole like company intra website. And so for us, we did try using Trello at one point, but it wasn't adopted well. And also it was hard to fit into all of our different processes. Whereas Notion's ability to kind of create a database for whatever you need to create a database for and have those things connect as you connect them has been really flexible to our workflow and how, every project can be a little bit different. Doesn't matter that they're different. We can define them in the right way and it still all plugs in there. So that's been big for us in the last year.
So are you using any type of like shop floor or small ERP to do any job tracking and costing? How are you kind of tracking?
We have that in Notion.
Per job. Okay.
Yeah. So I built it myself in Notion. That's kind of one of the reasons why I like Notion so much is because, instead of having to shop around for all these different ERPs or CRMs, like we could just kind of have it plug in how we want it to and build it out as we need it to. As far as like print flow tracking, I think that's probably our next challenge. I don't know if I'll be able to do that in Notion. Might be a little cumbersome, especially as the print finishes. It's like, do I need to print it again? Or is it something we need to just have like constantly be printing? If it's like a one-off project, having it added to the job queue. There's been a few softwares I've explored, but I haven't pulled trigger on any of those yet because we haven't been in too much danger of that and in terms of managing it ourselves. But I think as we grow, it's probably something that's going to be the next domino to fall. So.
Gotcha. So what does success look like for you and your company over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah.
Is it just growth or is it, or even beyond the growth, what is, success look like, or what is your definition of success over the next 12 to 24 months?
So we're working on, in addition to the new space, having a marketing apparatus just going for us, right? Allows us to just focus on the design and printing of everything, answering questions from clients and doing the material science side of it, but having a reliable kind of marketing apparatus where we just finish a project, take some pictures, describe it, as long as there's no NDAs, of course, and then have those things be out there so more and more people can see what we're doing and having that growth happen that way. But so I know the answer essentially was just growth there, just with a different kind of flavor to it. But for me, I'd say that's a huge thing for us is if we can have that frees us up to do that. Because I have guys that, like I said, they're contractors just because pay by the project. Just like if you were a contractor on a job site, hey, I'm hiring you to come in and put in the framing of the house. Your skill set is the CAD. And, I'm the jack of all trades. I can do everything, but freeing my time up to handle everything else, being a business owner and kind of steer the ship is something that I am always struggling with. So, 12 to 24 months, being able to have that stuff, freed up for us and kind of generating its own demand would be great to see. Of course, having a new space, I think would be helpful for that too. I'm excited to do our own sign, our new place. That's probably the cool thing for us too, is we were in an area that was historic, even though the building itself really didn't look that great. They wouldn't let us change anything on the exterior aside from putting a sticker on the window. So it's going to be cool to have our own sign and have that as well. So, and that sounds like a small thing, but man, it's going to be cool.
No, I tell you what, never underestimate, especially even just for morale, the ability to create your own identity. I love that, and that is a big deal. And boy, and you are in a tough place when you're under those historic designations. There isn't much you can do with them.
Yeah. So we're the new place should be out in the county, so there's going to be a lot less restrictions. I'm hoping for us to have to clear.
So when you look at your current client base, is it mostly like business to business, or how is that shaping up? Are you working with other basically founders that are creating their products primarily, or are you working with other manufacturers that say, hey, we've got this thing, but we want to prototype it, and maybe started as a small manufacturing with you guys, and then once we grow it, then we look at the injection process, or how is that shaping up for you?
Yeah, so we still are leaving almost every single revenue opportunity open, right? We're not really closing anything out unless it's a particularly difficult person to work with, right, or a business to work with. But of course, there's other things we say no to on principle, but really let's say the big drivers for us right now are the things that we design and sell on e-commerce, right? Like I said, going viral last year was great. With products that we invent and come up with, usually if we think it's cool, someone else will. We just got to find that someone else. And so that's been big. And so that's kind of the average person. Sometimes we're making something fun or funny or decorative, but we also do a lot of like functional things, solving a very particular problem. But usually when that's the case, there's usually going to be someone else out there that'll have that problem. And so far we've been okay finding them. Perpetual invention is kind of the e-commerce side of it. And that's really where I see a lot of the business coming in the future. But we also do a lot of stuff for other people that have ideas for things. Not everyone, even though 3D printing is becoming more accessible, not everybody wants to go through the fuss of buying a printer and also knowing what material to use. Is it impact resistant, chemical resistant? What other things is it going to be interacting with? Like the sun is a big deal. And also they don't have the ability, even if they bought a printer, AI is not able really to create a reliable 3D model of something, especially like functional. It's getting kind of close. And so I might be a little worried about that. I would be lying if I said I wasn't. But even then, you got to make a revision. I mean, I'm not sure if you ever tried to do just like AI photo generation of something, but
yeah.
it can hallucinate. And you're just like, all right, it's close, but it's never going to be right. And so I think we're still maybe a ways away from that being something that we're in danger of. And so just come to us and we can design it. If we don't get it right the first time, it's going to be close. And then it's just tweaks. And that's usually pretty easy to do. And so we do that for other people, like inventors that want to have a project try to get launched. And so we'll do that. We'll go through whatever revisions they want. We have a design retainer of 5 hours just so that when they come to us with an invention idea, we're covered. We'll refund any hours that don't get used. If say we get it right on the first hour, then heck yeah, like you got your thing and then we'll prototype it for you. And at that point, if you wanted to get it produced, then it's that 10,000 unit conversation, right? If they want to have us make it or go to an injection molding business, which is usually sending it to China and stuff. And then you got all these IP concerns too. So anyway, it's that part of the business I'd say is cool, but it's also not necessarily like great when you're, like you said, with the guys in Baltimore. You make the prototype, but after that, you got to find someone new. So I'd say one thing that's been growing for us a lot in the last couple of years, aside from e-commerce, is industrial. And so I know some industrial businesses have their own in-house 3D printing or started to add that. And I think that's cool. But I also know I've heard from plenty of them where they just don't have someone who can do it reliably or knows about it. And also they don't ever assign just one person to do that. It's always just something that's tacked on to someone else's job description or maybe a group of people's job description. And that leads to chaos. And maybe you have 4 people that really do know how to use the machine, but one guy who doesn't, and it breaks everything. And so there goes your investment into the printer and the material. Maybe it's not a totally, bad printer, but maybe in the long run that can be worth it. But if you just want to try something out, I mean, that's when I think a lot of times they reach out to us. We've had people that have had no investment in 3D printing and industrial, and people who have an entire 3D printing lab come to us because of these reasons. Just because we can provide a reliable service. We know all the materials that are available to the 3D printing space right now. We try to stay on top of it. And so when you have these industrial processes, that's when a lot of the chemical resistance question is really more of an industrial application rather than a consumer application. We can answer these questions and also tell you from experience what's worked in other factories and what hasn't. Of course, as long as we stick to our NDAs for these other businesses. But we've also even replaced metal parts in factory lines because maybe the OEM thought, oh, well, it needs to be metal. And maybe it did, or maybe it still does, but it's a part, maybe it's designed to break, or maybe it's a consumable. And it's like, well, if it's breaking anyway, if I can get the OEM for 10 grand, but you get the 3D printed plastic piece for 200 and it lasts a fifth of as long, then you're saving a lot of money in the long run. There's that, but also turnaround time. It's been huge. Sometimes they have to wait for these parts for weeks because it's coming from overseas, especially with other tariff stuff happening right now too. Even before that, they were having to wait weeks. But if it breaks and then breaks again, you're really in a pickle. So we've been a lot of maintenance guys' heroes in the last couple of years. But the other thing too that I've been really excited about in industrial applications is process improvement. I'm not trying to knock the OEM guys at all. I mean, they do great work, but maybe on an older piece of equipment, something's not working as well as it used to be and needs like a little nudge here or reinforcement here or an extra little step that we improvise that maybe had a person folding something or whatever. You can have a little 3D printed design that will go in and do that step for you, or at least assist the human in doing that step. And that's been really cool too. So not just replacing parts, but adding and improving processes for efficiencies purposes. So that's also been really, really cool for us. And
So do you have a goal of maybe having a certain mix between B2C and B2B eventually, or what's your thoughts on that?
personally, as long as I'm solving problems, I'm happy. And of course, making money is great too. But I think that keeps my creative side flowing, and I guess my team as well. These designers that we have working with us can, do some cool things and stay on top of that too. So I really do see it as a mix. When we get into a spot where maybe one of those business lines is taking all my attention, then I've got these guys that can definitely step up, and I'm sure they'd love to step up and do some more work for us on those things and grow us in a more proper way.
But it's a risk and an opportunity. You don't hit a home run with that viral thing all the time. You can't really count on that. And boy, having the industrial base to fall back on, if you have some way to continue to grow that and have a fun mix of the creative versus we won't call it boring, but it's just it's still creative. It's just a different creative because you're solving a different problem that's perhaps more mundane, but more predictable, perhaps. That's a great place to be in.
I do think this is
that's fine.
Cool little side note. I think one of my favorite examples of when those two things kind of overlapped was, I don't think I'll be in trouble mentioning any names here, because it was a pretty big, almost like a marketing thing for them too. But in Richmond, there's a engineering firm called the Timmins Group. They're civil engineering. I'd say they're a pretty decent size, and they do a lot of projects all over the state, do all kinds of things from renewables to all the typical civil engineering side of things. But one of their clients is Chesterfield County's EDA, economic development side of things. They're great. They've brought in Lego's first factory in North America is open in Chesterfield County, still under construction, but it's part of this massive job site that also has Amazon and Coca-Cola and Medline and other really big companies there. And there's still a bunch of land on there. So Timmins definitely has a lot that they want to see come in there because, of course, it translates to more work for them. So what we did, and I don't think this has happened anywhere else, we made a topographic model of the job site or of the development site that was in a bunch of pieces. So actually like 43 pieces, I think, on these guys. So what's cool about that is we can replace these tiles basically as they develop the land. We know on the grid where that land parcel would be. And as they develop it, we can update this like almost like a living document, but it's a 3D model.
Sweet.
Of all these different roads and ponds and buildings and everything that's going in here. But we also made each of the buildings magnetic. So on this really cool display piece, this thing was about 6.5 by 4.5 feet big, and it's right there in the lobby of Chesterfield County's EDA. And so whenever they have a business coming in to maybe look at that site or others, say, oh, well, here's Lego, and then you can just go and grab the Lego building off of the model and hand it to the prospective business coming in and everything. So we got to be there for the reveal of everything. And that was actually April of this year. We handed that over. And there's pictures of it on our LinkedIn and Facebook, but nothing like that had been done before. And that was something that was for a civil engineering firm, and you can do topography stuff and maybe some architecture stuff, but also kind of letting some of our creative side show and making some really kind of fun things with that, like the buildings being removable and the tiles being replaceable. It's fun, but also functional. And
absolutely. Well, you got a live model then. So that's in the development space. I don't know. They can't ask for much better than that, because you can actually say, oh, okay, you want to know what it looks like? Let me put a little camera down here. There you go.
And the even cooler part is I think that there's a lot of potential business coming forward for them. So whenever Timmins and Chesterfield County lands a new business coming in, then you got to keep the thing updated. So that'll be pretty cool. So I think doing that with other people would be great. Other EDAs or other maybe construction companies or something like that would be cool. But frankly, I've been busy enough to not have the time to reach out to those kind of businesses just quite yet. It's also a big undertaking to do that, but it's a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
So earlier you had mentioned AI. Are you guys using AI at all, or how is that technology impacting you guys yet?
So AI is obviously the very hot button topic right now. And I, for the most part, am anti-AI. I'd say overall, it could definitely be a good tool, to help people in their stuff. But I think the two things I'll kind of maybe three things I'll point to here would be, I'm not sure if you saw, Deloitte just got busted big time by the Australian government for using AI in their, consulting work for them, where it was hallucinating, making up things, citing real researchers, getting the data wrong. So is it reliable? Maybe, but probably maybe you can't bank on it. I wouldn't trust anything super important to it just quite yet. And of course, technology can improve. I'm not writing it off entirely. The other thing too is you also lose, like it's being implemented in a big way to get rid of jobs. And so of course that's not something that I am a huge supporter of. But the other thing that I think is also why I'm not trying to become reliant on it would be that right now, I mean, OpenAI is losing money like crazy. And so eventually the real cost of AI is going to be reflective. And so if I built a system that I became reliant on, maybe I say it is good at 3D modeling and I have it do all my 3D modeling for me. Maybe I get a little rusty. Maybe I forget a few things. Maybe next time I have a project that I need to come in and do something on, maybe I can't. Maybe I have to do some things, or maybe we grow to the point where it's like, all right, great. Now I've got all these projects and I physically will not be able to do them all myself. Of course, that means I would have to hire people. Great. But that's only if the AI fails, right? So, or it gets to be way too expensive. So really trying to future proof ourselves by not embracing technology is a really kind of strange way to think about it. But I definitely use it as a tool, like to help me with things, right? If I'm thinking through something I haven't done before, of course, Google first, it's less power use and more energy efficient and all that stuff, better for the environment. And usually you can find what you need that way too, even though Google's got its own AI too. But if I'm thinking through something a bit more complicated or am getting a bit more in the weeds on a technology that I used, but I haven't used in a certain way, or maybe writing a script to do something, I know something can be automated and I just need to do this one quick thing, that's a good use for it. But I wouldn't say we're going full AI by any means. And also, even if it gets better at things, if I personally don't think that's a path we need to go down, but it certainly has its use cases.
So is there a technology that in the 3D printing space that you're really excited and watching as you look forward to the next 12 to 24 months?
But metal 3D printing is been exorbitantly expensive and kind of out of reach for us for a while. The only people that have been able to do it are aerospace companies, NASA, defense contractors, and even then, to what extent building a piece of metal is still an option, right? So the cost of it is really crazy. I mean, that's really just because of all the power and all the stuff you got to be controlling to make it work functionally. But I have seen a few businesses trying to make it more affordable. There's a lot that can go wrong. This printer messing up can still mess up kind of in a big way, but nothing close to a metal 3D printing mess up. So I'm very excited to see how the space develops. I definitely think the lowering of the cost can be good, but I don't want it to just be eliminating the costs for the eliminating cost sake, because danger is a real thing, right? The other thing that I mentioned is the MJF or PolyJet. Basically, it's kind of like the resin printers that we have now in our shop. It lowers a platform into a vat of resin that flashes a UV image or uses a laser to flash a UV to cure the resin where you want it to, and then pulls it up, layer by layer. And that can get you super high def things, but typically only in one color. And so you can paint it afterwards if you want, or this, that, and the other, but it's a pretty straightforward technology. The resins are getting a lot better, and there's a lot of really cool things happening there. We've used some of the resin prints in some more industrial capacity for a variety of reasons. But PolyJet Fusion is basically inkjet like you see in like a HP or Epson or Brother printer, but in 3D. And so you can make full color objects in a 3D print. And so, all these machines you see behind me can do 4 colors or more, but every time you do that, you get to purge the nozzle, or you take a whole different nozzle and go print with that. And so like gradients are pretty much impossible. Just as print color 1 here, print. It's like a paint by numbers thing if you did those in a kit, right? That's pretty much how it looks and how it comes out. And so you're able to do some pretty cool things with a gradient filament, but you can't have this color transition to this color over the course of this without some really interesting or sophisticated and usually extremely wasteful things. So the PolyJet thing is really cool because you basically make a photorealistic lifelike object. Just, I think right now, from what I understand, it's been patented and locked in that pretty much. So as that starts to break down or expires, that technology is going to be really cool. Probably more for fun things, maybe not necessarily functional, but I can definitely think of a few functional use cases for that too. But yeah, that's definitely going to be an interesting one to see develop.
So as we're kind of wrapping up here, if you were going to give advice to another owner that was trying to build their business, what has been the one thing that's kind of you've been able to hook on to and say, whether it's technology, whether it's a process, whether it's mentorship, what's the one thing that's been the most valuable to you as you've been building your your business?
I think definitely as an entrepreneur, you got to believe in yourself, right? That's been a huge thing. If you know that you have strengths and if you know that you can learn things quickly, then I think you're a good person to be an entrepreneur. And I'd say that mental toughness is definitely a big factor to it. Otherwise, you're for sure going to fail, right? You don't have that. But as far as like a tool or a mentor goes, I would say most generally applicable, what I'd probably say is the Notion tool I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's pretty low cost, but also it can kind of fit anyone if you learn it. And I know it's probably, I promise I'm not sponsored by them. I'm genuinely just saying that that's been a pretty good tool for us. I'd say that one of the things that really got me the most was my team adopted it too. That's a big thing. Yeah, there's a learning curve, but once you get it, there's a lot more than even I don't know about it yet that I think is still pretty cool and a lot of things that you can learn about.
So that's been your real game changer, is that using that Notion?
I'd say so. I mean, because you have so many things in your head, right? You got to track down, you got to write down. And I've still got post-it notes. I'm not saying Notion has replaced everything. It's not perfect, right? Because for me, I still have to say, oh, post-it note's still your best friend because that way it won't go. But especially as like you have bigger things or more sophisticated projects and clients, like having that database there, because you will forget things as you grow and do more and more stuff and say, I haven't reached out to this business in a year. Maybe it's about time to reach out to them again. There's kind of like a CRM as well. You can kind of build it to whatever you need it to be. If you're just a coffee shop, or maybe you don't need it, but maybe you can use it for your inventory tracking and scheduling. It's just such a versatile tool. And I'd say that's probably my easiest recommendation. It's pretty good at kind of organizing anything.
Awesome. Well, cool. I think we're about wrapping up. Why don't we remind everybody again where they can get a hold of you and what's the best way to get a hold of Duncan and get stuff done?
Proto. Yeah. So you can find us on social media still at the 3D Shop or the 3D Shop Uptown, and we'll have Presto Proto handles kind of putting out content soon. But presto-proto.com, or if you just Google Presto Proto, you should find us. Happy to talk with any other people who are kind of getting 3D printing going themselves, or just other designers as we kind of grow. It's good to be helpful for other people, but you never know when you can help someone else out in that regard, whether it be advice or production or materials and stuff. I think the industry is growing in a lot of big ways, and the more people view it as a solution that can actually work. As the technology grows and improves and these really nice printers actually become reliable, and they're much more reliable now, like I said, than before, you can view it as a real solution to the problems that, you encounter in your everyday life. And there's tons of problems out there to be solved. That definitely is the plug for me for sure. PrestoProto.com.
All right. Well, hey, Duncan, really appreciate you being on the show today. And we'll put this up for everybody to see. And
all right. Thank you, Tom.